Hello. Yeah. So my name is Alexander Podhausen. I'm a customer success engineer in IntelliJ team, and I've been working for JetBrains for 15 years already. So that's a big, long journey. And I saw a lot of changes in development tools during my work as well. And even, what is interesting that like 10 years ago, we discussed about AI stuff, AI in development. And we discussed that, okay, if AI will start do development, then it means that we do not know what will be next, so what to predict. So, and we call it like a singularity in development, because after this point, we just do not know anything. And now, today, we are much closer to this point, and that's so exciting to observe. I mean that to know that like 10 years ago, you discussed that, then you stop thinking about that because yes, this is like something you do not need to think. And voila, it's here. And today, I'm going to do kind of motivational talk because it's very hard to say what is customer success, like what is the standard for everybody, for every team, for tooling, because everybody do that. So in some sense, even if the kid is doing dishwashing for the mom is a customer, and they have some customer success conversations about the how it's successful. So everybody is doing it anyway, and I want to do this talk as a motivational talk in terms of what we did, so what we thought is important and essential, and how it's important, how it's different in tooling to the rest of the world, let's say. Before I start, I wanted to mention a bit about my evolution. So this talk will be part of a lot of I here in the talk. But the idea here is to show some, accidental nature of life in general. And then we will apply it to customer success as well, because this is very important to do it on scale, so that accidental things will happen and you can do your product better and better. On the other hand, it's probably just like interesting stories about myself, so you share how it's interesting. Anyway, first accidental thing happened. I just born in some arbitrary family. I couldn't choose that. And I also couldn't choose what I will start to do. That was the piano. That wasn't my choice. Then classical guitar was my choice, but anyway, it's somehow connected. And another accidental thing happened when my mom met another mom in the music school, and she learned about some mathematical class, and I need to go to apply for some Olympiad and then to continue doing that. And that's how it started. I mean, this was absolutely accidental. I can't even imagine that if it would be different, what would be my life? Like absolutely everything different. So because that moment was like crucial for my life. And I started doing math, and actually I thought that it's more or less like rest of the life is planned. I know I will do the math, I will do the science, then probably Fields Medal or I don't know, Nobel Prize in economics. Why not? However, another accidental thing happened, and I met my future wife, and this requires some money. I was quite arrogant, and I thought that software development is for those who are not able to do math or any other science. So that was my thought. But when I started to need money, I decided, okay, but you can be smart enough for the mathematical, but you can sell your soul, your brain to software development just for money. And that was fine. And what I did, I just wrote 3 arbitrary emails to 3 companies about saying, okay, I'm good. I don't know how to develop, but you will teach me and you will pay money for me and everything will be fine. So another arbitrary thing that among these 3 companies, JetBrains was one of them. I didn't know anything about all of these 3 companies. And speaking of the customer success, never do that. So if you go to talk with some company, just learn something about this company, because otherwise you can do mistakes. I will tell you which one. So two of the companies never answered me, and I'm so glad they did that. So because again, life would be very different in my case. And JetBrains answered actually, and they told, okay, please implement the Java syntax highlighting editor in Swing and do it like load the big files. So it means that highlighting should be incremental. I thought, okay, it's fine. I never did such stuff, but I will try. So I started to read book about Java. So I spent 2 days for reading, and then 2 days for implementing actual code, which still exists somewhere on GitHub. So, but it's funny to observe. And the funny part is that, so then I sent the project. That's actually what impressed, because it was just 4 days for somebody without experience. And I just sent the project in most famous and most popular IDE for Java. It was Eclipse. And I got the answer. I think, what the weird people answering like that? We will not review your code while it's Eclipse project. I thought that, okay, they are very arrogant. Why not to accept the most popular Java IDE? That was, like so crazy. But when I realized that this is the company behind the IntelliJ idea, everything became much clearer that time. Why they do that? Anyway, actually, they accepted that. They saw that I'm the newbie because I forgot the simple basics. So at the beginning of the book, I missed that to compare strings, you need to use equals. And I used equal, and Eclipse didn't help me actually to fix that. If I would use IntelliJ, I would see the inspection about this stuff. So yeah, it still wasn't like harmful. I still got the job, and I started to do software engineering. So again, this, like the one accidental thing after another, and another happened because, so I applied for MPS. Do anybody know what is MPS? Okay, few people, both from JetBrains and one from not from JetBrains. Anyway, that's something really complicated, but position was closed, and they suggested me to the guy from the Scala plugin team, so to support Scala, one of the most complicated languages. And actually, that guy knew another guy who was a friend of my wife, so he was able to ask, "Am I really good?" And that means another lesson speaking about the customer success. So I mean, networking is a lot of, it's very important. So do the networking. If you have a network, it can help you in future to get some recommendation or kind of. And that's how I got this position. Then career could continue like a software engineer for a long time, and I had, like 3 mentors in my life during the Scala plugin time. And probably in order to become a team lead for the Scala plugin, I needed to kill all of them, because that's how it works in JetBrains. However, I was lucky enough because the one of them just went to Google, so he left JetBrains. Another decided to go to science and do math. He thought always that I'm stupid that I left the math in terms of the software engineering, because he always wanted to do math. And actually that's happened to him, and I'm super glad that he's a professor now somewhere in Spain. So that's super nice. And the third one changed it into linguistics, so it's languages as well. Why not? So in general, I became a team lead, and I'm super glad for that, because I learned a lot how to communicate with people, how to build a team from scratch. And JetBrains was good enough for that, because it just, I could do anything. So I could do experiments to hire new people to work with interns and whatever I wanted. I did a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot. So that's how I became better team lead. And after I joined the Kotlin plugin, I even became better after that. So because I started to learn how to work with existing teams. So we are joining to the team lead of that. So you need to communicate. We started to do partnerships. So like what we did with Google on Android Studio, on the Kotlin. So I participated a lot in there. So that's how I learned that. So as well. And, something should happen for me to switch to the customer success. And actually, in my case, it was some unlucky case because I got a serious disease. And while I was in hospital, our engineering manager started to talk with me like every day, talking about the career stuff, because probably he realized it's a point to attract this guy to do a different stuff. And he has something in mind because he has the need for IntelliJ to start listening customers more careful. And by customer, I mean that it's different from user. So a user is an end user, developer, and customer is somebody who paying money for IDE instead of for this particular user. So we desperately needed to start listening customers. And that's why I started doing customer success engineering. That was like completely new journey. I had no experience except working with people, except few partnerships, but that was something I started. I already had some network because I participated in conferences a lot, and that's how I started to talk with different companies. Of course, speaking about the customer success, there is a big difference between JetBrains and other companies. Because JetBrains is famous company, and it's we go to somebody and say, okay, let's talk about the IDE. Most probably they use some of our IDEs and they want to talk. So that's a really great simplification. For lots of tooling startups, it's a huge problem because they have not so many customers and very hard to convince somebody to start talking. But I don't know how to solve this problem. I'm sorry. So I have no solution here. And also another thing I started to do, because customer success is some kind of creating a partnership with your customer, especially in tooling, because they are paying money for our tools. So they do business based on our tools. And that means that we are do business together. So kind of, and we need to establish partnerships. So customer success is kind of partnership. And that's why I also started to do kind of business development, which means partnership with vendors, other tooling members. And, top of my career right now, because I actually thought that the Scala is the most complicated language. Probably not, but among the at least popular languages, so we can find more complicated. But now there is a very popular language which is more complicated, and this is Chinese language. So I thought that, I started to plan to talk with Chinese customers, and I thought that 2 months will be enough to learn Chinese. Why not? I learned Java in 2 days. Chinese is a bit more complicated, so probably 2 months would be enough. And I partially succeeded. I learned like 700 words in 2 months, like 500 characters. I was able to read, but actually I felt like completely useless. I mean, my knowledge after 2 months wasn't enough to participate in the business conversations. But that's just like a funny story. Let's move to IntelliJ ideas evolution. It's like just the basics, what we have speaking about the business before we started to customer success. So initially, like in 2000, we started from the project from dog fooding. So who knows what is dog fooding, actually? Okay. So speaking about the dog fooding, is just like eating their own dog food. That's what we say usually. But that's very usual for tooling, because company has some problems with infrastructure and company is trying to solve it. And initially for lots of tooling it usually starts inside of the company, and then they realize they successfully solve some problem, they start to expand it or do it open source. One of the famous examples is Bazel, which was the Blaze, like internal project in Google, and then it became like something outside. But initially, it's a dog fooding stuff. So that's an example. Then we realized that IntelliJ is a big stuff, actually, and we cannot cover everything, like every development style, everything. So we just desperately needed feedback from people, and that was Open Issue Tracker. And what is great, speaking about the tooling, Open Issue Tracker is something where also developers suggest something. So they already understand something in your field, they understand their needs, and it's much simpler than compared to, I don't know, some other businesses where you need like first line of support, second line of support to filter out some crazy feedback. But it wasn't enough. We started to need more and more feedback, but not, so we got a lot of feedback. However, priorities sometimes could be very complicated to distinguish. So we started to need the data analytics. And in reality, it wasn't enough because data analytics is collected among all the users. And I will tell another example a bit later, also about the Bazel, that actually listening customer is very important because you can listen right from the people, right from the big companies who's paying more money than just single user, what they actually need. So that's what we started. I actually started like a few years ago, talking with customers. What's next? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that this is not like the top of evolution for tooling, but for us, we just came to the customer. A lot of startups, they are starting from customers, especially in tooling, because they have just a few customers. They cannot do like Open Issue Tracker. They do not need that. They do not need data analytics. They just need talking with these few customers they are starting from. But that's a different evolution and this different way of doing things. So some business basics also, it could be important to speak about the customer success. So first, it's what we started at JetBrains with IntelliJ. It was B2C model. So we started to sell it to lots of users. And actually, there is a big difference with B2B model when you are trying to sell it to the big corporations. And speaking of the tooling, both exist. So like Gradle, they started from mass market and it's spread as a project to everybody. However, some smaller startups could be starting just from B2B mean. In reality, it's always the mix. So in tooling, so you need like the mixed model when you have enterprise edition for something. Again, Gradle Enterprise is an example, and something open source and very famous, and you have at conferences, you are convincing people to use it. And that's very, very often case in tooling. Also, speaking about the real examples, I wanted to use an example about Bosch Power Tools, which is you can speaking about the country where I'm from. Came from Lithuania. Lots of professionals using like Bosch because it's like professional tool, really, and a lot of people who just need few holes in their walls per year, they still want the Bosch. So that means that they are trying to mix their strategies. So they're keeping popular on the professional market, but they also have simpler versions, cheaper versions, so that everybody can buy and afford. So what else? There is also ecosystem model. Speaking about B2C, B2B, an ecosystem model is very important actually also. So you need in reality to mix all of them. And in IntelliJ, it's also what we have like a marketplace, like a plugin development, and we still need to have it. I put here as an example for ecosystem is 5G. It's one of the probably biggest ecosystem in the world, and it's very complicated to create that. But humanity was able to actually to implement that. Anyway, in intelligent marketplace, we have some issues which will be needed to solve in future probably. So one of them is like developing plugins for IntelliJ requires JVM languages. So when I started to do customer success and we talking with, let's say, PHP companies, and they're saying, okay, we need this one. I am answering, you can implement plugin, no problem. So just go and implement plugin. And they said, stop, is it needed to use Java for it? Like, not only Java, you can do it in Kotlin. Say, no. Is it possible to do in PHP or JavaScript? So that scares them a lot. So it's already a problem. And the bigger problem even is the Swing UI, so which is complicated. It solves a bit because you can use JSF, you can do a browser UI and plugin tail, but this is not like a mainstream solution right now in IntelliJ. We do not enough business development. So if you are wanting to develop your plugin, you're more or less on your own. And the model we are implemented for marketplace is more or less B2C again, which is a bit weird. I mean, B2C that because we have a Slack platform channel, so you can go and have a support there. So it's like a direct support to the single person, not like a communication with the company from the company to the company, which is essential and important. I can say no business development because we have this partnership with Google, for example, around Android Studio, and we are keeping in touch around that. Marketplace was more or less technology first solution, and that's the big problem at JetBrains because we like technology and we are trying to solve problems mostly technological from the beginning, not always product-wise or business-wise. It's especially happening now because lots of vendors and tooling vendors choosing another platform, which is now is VS Code, to start like a main plugin implementing for VS Code first, and then IntelliJ is a second. So that's also an issue for the marketplace. And yeah, we need to keep and actually create a strategy around. So that's what we have. Anyway, these three stuff is very important altogether. And speaking about the B2B model, that's what we have right now. That's especially with VS Code, we are now getting this red mark about fast decision making. So they're moving us a bit. However, speaking about B2C model, we are keeping good actually. And in B2B model, we are succeeded only in high price of the product, which is fine. But yeah, it's not the only thing we need to succeed. So we need to have like a customer success, which helps also with decision making, which directs to the decision makers and helps to understand the reality and to get all the information. And also solution should be highly customizable. So imagine this competition like between Boeing and Airbus. So imagine that the pilot could choose which plane he wants to use. So that's something sounds like with IDEs, like developer can decide which plane to use. It's logical from the one reason because to start driving Boeing, you need to learn a lot of stuff, to read huge books. The same with IDEs. Actually, you need to learn a lot of stuff. It's a professional tool. However, such companies like Ryanair, they have like a single type of the planes, and that's it. So if you want to work for Ryanair, this decision made on the company level. I think that's partially speaking about these kind of decisions. IntelliJ on the early stages influenced market. To say that most of the businesses, most of software engineering companies, they say, okay, you're a developer, IDE is your decision. So, and that was like partially our influence to the market because of our strategy. This is still fine. I think this is actually great. But in any case, some companies and what I now see in China, for example, they have a stronger influence on their developers. So that's also exists on the market. So that's why we need the customer success. That's why we need to develop these kind of things. So what to do actually? So first, we need to implement this kind of stuff like customer success team. We also need to implement this high customization stuff. That's what we implemented by Toolbox Enterprise, which improves efficiency of using our IDEs, and it's made our IDEs more customizable. And also another stuff which we just started, I will share a bit later what we have around the enterprise services, and I will share why it's needed as well. And the last is important from the ecosystem development, but again, you need a good foundation on B2C and B2B levels to build an ecosystem level. So that's in the plan. So speaking about the customer success, one of the more important things is to have a structure of that. So, and that's what we partially implemented, but not fully. So speaking about the structure, you need to understand that all the customer success engineers should be kind of replaceable. It should be a structure, what to talk about, which tools you want to discuss, which problems you usually learn from the customers. So that should be prepared, and you should share this structure with customers as well. So this is like a partnership stuff. But under the hood, it's very, very simple. Like you should meet and you should have a way how to meet. So your sales team should give you contacts, technical contacts to whom you can talk. Then you should have a regular conversation. That's why it's the most important technique for the customer success. But you should listen, actively listening, not by trying to push your ideas. You need to listen their problems of your customer, and talk mostly about that. And that's it, because customer wants value from you, and value is mostly around the problems, not about trying to sell them another stuff. So because customer success is not sales in reality. It sometimes sounds like sales because sometimes you have a tool which can solve the problem, and this tool costs some money, but it's not the sales. You are suggesting solution, and this is normal stuff. Helping usually means helping with the smaller size problems. So they're giving you kind of problems which could be solved in a week or 2 weeks, and you are pushing team to help and fix that. And that's how customers feel the value of the cooperation, because you are increasing priority of some issues, and that's very important. And the last step is invention. So invention is very important because you can accumulate the feedback from different customers, and if you're actively listening, you can even find the new product and start it, which can be useful from the beginning to bunch of the customers. So let's go to the real cases which I got. So first, when I started, we mostly were focused on the IDE performance. It's like problem number one of IntelliJ IDEA. Speaking about the data analysis, it's not the biggest problem ever in IntelliJ, because lots of people develop, like 90% develop smaller size projects. And all the big corporations created, like enormous and big repositories, which started to be slow. Because IDE is trying to be smart, and IDE should learn everything about the project, and it's becoming more and more complicated. So IDE performance is kind of the stuff, and that's, kind of the questions, we are bringing it. Was it known? Is it new feedback? Speaking about the performance, kind of we knew something, but when we started to raise the issues around the performance from one enterprise customer, another one, and when you can, sum the revenue from these customers, you can think, okay, this is probably very, very high priority issue, because the number of money we are getting from these customers is huge in reality. Is it simple to solve? No, actually. So after 2 years, it's still the huge problem. We did a lot of progress in reality, but it's crazy complicated in reality. And we are keeping constantly looking for solution and working in this direction. So it's a lot of resources. So, but what is important in terms of talk and listen? So first, when we are talking with professional on the customer side, they have own managers, they have own metrics, and their managers say, improve the performance, help us. So they have own internal pressure. And when we are started to talk, we got this pressure to ourselves from this professional. And that's very important, actually, because they need this way to of course, we sometimes can get it in some ultimative way, like ultimatum, like please improve performance, otherwise we will leave. And this is fine. I mean, this is like honest feedback, and we can deal with that. We can pass it to the team, and they can decide what to do with that. And by passing it, we are increasing pressure to IntelliJ IDEA team. So that's a final goal for this. Then around so I told I will talk about the Bazel. We had a problem, and lots of customers started to complain about the Bazel plugin for IntelliJ IDEA. Was it known? Actually, no, already. So no, it wasn't known, because it was, according to data analytics, it was like a 3% market, and probably JetBrains had no need to invest into that. And that's incorrect, because we started to talk with big companies. They are mostly moving to the Bazel because it's helpful for the big repositories. And this is exactly our most paying customers. So we should get the quality for this stuff. Again, is it simple to solve? No, that's actually what customer success should do. It should take the complicated problems and try to move into this direction. So we started to reduce pressure for the customer in these terms. So what we realized that actually Google develops the Bazel plugin for IntelliJ, and the problem was that most of companies wanted to add something to this. Even that this was the open source project, it was hard to apply pull requests. So most of companies had own fork. And because the companies do not talk to each other, some talk actually, but not all of them. And we started to communicate with one, another, third one. And we know that they implemented and fixed the same issues in their forks. So that's super inefficient in reality, speaking of the wall. So what we needed is actually to move it to some separate repository, which will be worldwide, and have one single fork for the Google. So that's not simple, because it requires some business development, some discussions with Google, partnership on this level. And also we needed to invest. So we needed to start the team. And here's the Justin. He's now team lead of the Bazel team, which is now 10 people. So 10 people doing the Bazel plugin for IntelliJ. And this is like huge investment, and actually one of the wins of the customer success. So this is invention part. So yeah, that's the case. Another case, we started from when we started the customer success, a lot of companies mostly discussed like remote development in terms of, oh, we are curious about the remote development. And that was like constant conversation about the remote development in this direction. However, in few years, now we are in the situation when most of companies talking, big companies say, we already have a remote development. We invested a lot of money into infrastructure, into the team behind this infrastructure, and that's really serious. So is it important for JetBrains? Yes, it's important. By increasing pressure to IntelliJ product team, we can increase investment into this field. And we are not yet ready with remote development. Speaking about the IntelliJ IDEA, it's not like a perfect choice yet. However, we are moving towards that, and we more or less prepared for that. So, and we also working with customers by sharing the reality, what we have now, and what we are working on in future, and collecting feedback. So everybody is ready, because it's like a big problem in reality. And also everybody is curious about fleet. And so that's during the talk and listen phase, we are just answering this question: what is fleet? What is designed for? And do they need to take a look for it? Yes, they should, but it's not like enterprise ready. So that's another case. And the fourth case was around invention of toolbox enterprise. So we started to listen companies, and a lot of them had own solutions, including like own Bazel plugin, and they needed infrastructure for that. So that's how we came with the idea to develop Toolbox Enterprise, which is the requirement for highly customizable solutions. So because now with Toolbox Enterprise, you can set up practically your own IDE on top of the IntelliJ IDEA and to deliver to whole your company. You can collect your own performance metrics, your own analytics, which is very important for the enterprise companies. I'm not going to do a demo, but if you are interested, we have a booth, so you can go to Toolbox Enterprise team. We'll show you all the features and give you access to the probably better testing of that. So all the discussion could be on the booth. So the next case is shared indexes, which is also very interesting for lots of enterprise companies. And because of performance issues, I think I'm running out of time, but okay, I'll try to be quick. So shared index is it's our first steps towards the enterprise products, because indexing is part of the performance problems. It's slow, and for big companies, it could be up to 1 hour to index the project, which is a lot of time, and these companies are able to calculate money behind this time. So like developers do nothing for this hour, and it means that they're paying for this hour of this developer, and they can calculate money. It's a lot of them. So shared indexes is something we implemented specifically for enterprise companies, but we started to listen and trying to help for the companies, and we collected 2 problems, actually the main problems. The first one is that it's very hard for them to implement and support shared indexes in internal infrastructure. And this is unsolvable because it's like they're professionals and we cannot move there and help them. Another problem is that actually we do not know if it's helpful. So for example, without the stats and analytics about the shared indexing performance, we are blind. And for the enterprise, it's where they need to invest into shared indexes infrastructure, but with unknown results. They cannot report to the management how much money they saved for this step. And that's where Toolbox Enterprise actually can help, but that's a bit late. And the next case is services. And our first try was with just one of the customers. I will not mention which exactly, but this customer is here. And we started to collaborate, and they complained that performance is bad, and it was terribly bad, that's for sure. We started from trying to collect the analytics. They shared the analytics with us, like all their company analytics came to JetBrains servers. We started to collect it for half year. We tried to improve something, and we improved actually, but in general, no luck. So improvement was very, very small. Then we decided, okay, new model. We will try to take a look into your projects. Like, I don't know, your share with us your code with the cost of $50 billion or something like that, and we'll help you. No, actually, they thought we do not want to share the $50 billion code with another company. So, and that's a problem because there is a huge project. We could look into that, but we cannot. We actually started that, and legal said no. And in a year, they just came to us and said, okay, we set up, we have signed everything, and we are there. And actually, we were lucky because the engineer I agreed he will help. He was still available, so he was ready to help, and that was a lot of luck in reality, because in a year this engineer could do a lot of different stuff already. So, and that worked. We got tons of improvements. He helped a lot, but it's not scalable. I mean, 1 year, sure, no. So speaking about the accidental, I told the story about the accidental nature of my life. We want to increase the probability of what? Of helping and possibility for customer to get help. So that's why we do the customer success, and that's why we need the scale. We don't want, and especially JetBrains with our scale, we don't want to help just for a single customer. We want the scale. And that's why we need something like a services. So when we have the idea that somebody needs help, external help, we have a problem like shared indexes that not all the customers is ready or able to implement. We have actually a long-term partner who do services already, VirtuSlab, and we worked a lot with this company. So we have this component already. And we have a toolbox enterprise which can prove the analytics stuff. So now we can do the chemistry mix all together, and this is opportunity for the future. So we have a single partner right now, but in general, if somebody ready to do help with shared indexes, just contact me. We can discuss this business development partnership. So what lessons we have? So speaking about B2C and B2B, it's just different teams working together. You saw that it's super different goals. Like this team focused on end users. You need to do a pretty ID, do the theming, like dark theme, and so on. For the business, it doesn't need that, but it needs to calculate money. Okay. And yeah, speaking about for example, this presentation I just did in plain white, like no theme. It's like super B2B way. Okay, I'm joking. So it's different. And moreover, if you have this in a different teams, like one for businesses, another for end users, they even can find for resources and attention, which is great actually, because the winner will be, I don't know. This is always good when you have fights. So it needs to be systematic, not just like arbitrary conversations. But of course, for smaller companies like startups, usually like CEO of the startups just do all the customer success stuff, which is fine. But when the company becomes bigger, have it systematic. So we had like 3 customer success engineers, and now we finally got 3 more. So at JetBrains, we probably will move to this more systematic way. Yes, and networking is very important. So that's why I'm here as well, because I want everybody to freely contact me as well to discuss any opportunities we can do. So conferences and just spreading word, recommendations, and everything like that. But that's more or less obvious because everybody do that, and this is like needed for businesses. So if you have questions now or later, so you can use any of my contacts. As I kind of invaded into China, so I have a WeChat now. Yeah. So, and last week I was in Shanghai actually. I spent 2 days in Europe, in Vilnius, and now here, so it's like 15 hours shift. Don't do that. No way. So yeah, just please contact me and speak. Let's talk about the customer stuff or partnership stuff or anything else.